What is going on, you guys? MissedThePart here, back again with another video. In today's video, we are going to be talking about 5 what ifs you need to read. So let's get right into the list. And number 5 is What If Issue 4. The symbiote takes over Peter Parker and takes full control of his mind, leaving him for dead. So in this what if scenario, instead, what actually happens here, instead of Peter Parker rejecting the symbiote, we have the symbiote rejecting Peter Parker. Now, it's a really weird twist of events on Battle World, where instead in this universe it just took full control of his mind and it rejected him, and what actually happens here is Peter would become an old man and eventually die in this universe, and the symbiote would go on to other heroes such as Hulk and Thor, and it's just a must read because this is just a really interesting story of the Venom symbiote. It didn't know what it wanted to do. You know, it wanted other things instead. It wanted power. You know, he wanted to latch onto Thor, then he wanted to latch onto the Incredible Hulk, and eventually, you know, Hulk would have the symbiote, and that's when all things broke loose because, you know, you had a giant monster in a symbiote suit, and, you know, it was just going full crazy mode, and then eventually, you know, Peter had to stop it, but he was too old, and eventually, you know, the Fantastic Four get involved, and it's just a really great read if you're into some of these fan fictions and what ifs. And, you know, this what if comic is just, it's just really interesting how, you know, in Battle World events went differently, and that's just something that I really love. And coming in at number 4 would have to be Uncle Ben Lives. Now, I know this is just a crazy what if because, you know, in What If Uncle Ben Lives, he just actually helps Spider-Man. You know, in this universe, Uncle Ben didn't get shot because he ended up stopping the criminals, so he didn't end up getting shot, and Uncle Ben would actually find out that Peter was Spider-Man because Spider-Man's costume was actually underneath the table. So, you know, he throws the table thing under and actually finds that it was him and that he was Spider-Man the entire time. And the really cool dynamic about this is that Uncle Ben and Spider-Man actually team up in this universe. So, you know how where J. Jonah Jameson was actually slandering Spider-Man, and this time he actually confronts J. Jonah at the Daily Bugle with Spider-Man, and he actually reveals that, you know, he was Spider-Man, and they actually all work together. And it was just a really weird thing because J. Jonah Jameson was happy that he was getting photos of Spider-Man because he knew Peter was Spider-Man, and Uncle Ben was actually helping Peter with all this knowledge, and, you know, he was pretty much just helping him become Spider-Man and use his great power with responsibility. And it's just a really cool comic that I hope that you guys read because it's probably one of my favorite what ifs. And, you know, when I read it, I was completely blown away, and I was like, whoa, like, this comic, like, they should actually make this a whole series. You know, I would love to see that happen. So, you know, it just makes it feel that Spider-Man wasn't feeling alone, and he actually had Uncle Ben there. And number 3 would actually have to be Spider-Man Becomes a Murderer. So in this alternate timeline, really wacky timeline, where in this universe, Spider-Man just became a killer and started murdering thugs and started murdering his villains because he thought, you know, instead of putting them in jail, he might as well put them out for good so then he won't have to deal with them later. Now, I think in this universe, I think he actually killed the Lizard. Now, I'm not too sure because there was 2 alternate what ifs of what if Spider-Man was a murderer, and there was one where instead of the Torment Todd McFarlane series, he actually killed Lizard. So he left Lizard to die. Now, I don't know if that's this comic book, but What If Spider-Man Became a Murderer is a really cool story, and it's a must-read as well if you're into those kind of dark storylines where, you know, people fall to the dark side and all this stuff. And Spider-Man truly did fall to become almost a villain in this storyline because he was pretty brutal, and, you know, he didn't take no for an answer. And coming in at number 2 would have to be What If Punisher had the symbiote. One of my favorite storylines of all time. I got this book at Comic-Con and read it, and the Punisher actually gets the symbiote, and he starts going after tons of criminals with the symbiote. And in this universe, Eddie Brock never actually got the symbiote, so when Spider-Man took it off, it went to the Punisher. Now, this was really cool that Frank Castle got the symbiote in this universe and not Eddie Brock, because it's like, you know, like the symbiote can do all this stuff, but with Frank Castle, he can just do a lot more that Venom can't really do, because instead of him having guns and stuff, like the symbiote uses different guns, and it's just really cool to see that as well. And I think Daredevil and Spider-Man was actually in this comic book. I don't know if they were teaming up with him, but it's just really interesting, and it's a must read as well. And coming in at number 1 is what if Gwen Stacy lived? Now, this is a book that I want you guys to read. Like, when I read this, I was like, this is just crazy, because the story to this book is where he actually had one last chance to save Gwen, and he took the chance, so he actually used his webs instead, and he got pulled further. So then he actually twisted his back, and then he actually saved Gwen, and they both fell in the water. And, you know, Green Goblin thought that they both died, but in reality, they both ended up living. And since Gwen didn't know Peter was Spider-Man at this point, he actually took his mask off and revealed that he was Peter Parker to Gwen Stacy, and she actually hated him because he thought that he ended up killing her father. And in this universe, you know, she just hated him. And then at the start of it, they actually get back together, and like, it's really interesting to see how, like, you know, Gwen hated Spider-Man, but then actually when she found out that it was Peter, she liked Spider-Man. So it's really weird. And then they actually ended up getting married, but then J. Jonah Jameson found out that he was Spider-Man, so they ended up ruining the marriage, and Peter pretty much ran off and never came back to Gwen ever again. So, you know, it's a twist of events where, you know, like, Spider-Man gets exposed, but it was because a cost of a life. So, you know, this is a really cool what if, and I think he actually stopped Green Goblin in this universe, you know. But these are 5 what ifs you need to read. So hopefully go out to your comic book store and find these what ifs, because these are a must read. And if you guys did enjoy my list, do make sure to subscribe, like, share, and turn your notifications on so you and your friends can stay all up to date with the latest content. But anyways, as always, peace out.